Hi there, Michael here. If you're working with immersive or spatial audio, you might have gotten the impression that there hasn't been much innovation over the last couple of months. It almost seems as if interest has died down. There were no notable new plugin releases, and the updates to digital audio workstations included very little new features in terms of immersive audio, with the small exception of Sony 360 RA integration into Pro Tools, maybe. But that impression is a bit incorrect. While there were no major news, a couple of developers have started to almost quietly update some of their plugins with immersive audio features. They usually do that by extending them to work on 16-channel tracks so that they can work on channel configurations up to 9.1.6 or even third-order ambisonics. These are updates that were not specifically advertised, and unless you read through the release notes, you might not even be aware that the plugin you already own is now multi-channel capable. Over the next few weeks, I'm therefore going to release a few review videos of such plugin updates. And we are going to kick things off with an update to the Patchwork plugin by Blue Cat Audio. In case you're not familiar with Patchwork, this is a plugin that serves as a plugin host within your digital audio workstation. It allows you to create plugin chains that you can then store and recall as presets. Patchwork has been able to internally work with 8 channels in the past, but that feature was very limited in its use. 8 channels is not enough for second-order ambisonics and clearly not capable of handling multi-channel formats used by Dolby Atmos, such as 7.1.2, 7.1.4 or 9.1.6. In its most recent update, Blue Cat Audio extended that to 16 channels, which suddenly makes it much more interesting, because that does now support ambisonics up to third order, as well as multi-channel up to 9.1.6. Now, before we get into checking out that new feature within our DAW of choice, I do need to point out that at the time I'm recording this video, this 16-channel feature seems to have a bug that, let's say, causes substantial issues. But by the time you are watching this video, that bug has hopefully been resolved. And with that being said, let's jump into our DAW and load up Patchwork. So I'm going to work with Ableton today, and I'm going to work on a Mac. And the reason I've chosen Ableton is because I want to demonstrate how you can use Patchwork in order to bring multi-channel support into Ableton. And we're going to use that in order to create a bed for the Dolby Atmos Composer so that we can create a full Dolby Atmos session with bed channels as well as objects. Now, I've already loaded up Tune, and what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to use the standard preset, and I'm just going to create a little MIDI file here, and that's going to be a very simple one because we just want to demonstrate the capabilities here. So let's have a listen what we have here, and once again, this is going to be relatively straightforward. That's really all we need. But let me maybe double the length of that MIDI node, or maybe even quadruple, because that is actually a really nice preset if we take it a little bit longer. So what do we have right now? So let's just have it. Yeah, that's good enough. So let's load up Patchwork. So for that, I'm going to search for Patchwork. And I'm going to use the VST3 version of Patchwork. Now, Patchwork comes in 2 versions. One is the effects plugin and one is the instrument plugin. And unfortunately, the effects plugin has a bug. And we're going to actually see that bug. And that bug actually really hinders us in using the plugin in any meaningful way. But we will actually see that the instrument plugin actually works fine. So my hope is that Blue Cat Audio will actually fix that bug in the effects plugin soon. So by the time you're watching this, that might no longer be the case. But for the purpose of this video, let's just add the VST3 version of the effects plugin to our track, and this opens up Patchwork. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about how Patchwork actually works because there's quite a lot to talk about, but in principle, all you really need to know is that this is a plugin that hosts other plugins, and you have sort of a pre-chain that is a chain that is applied to all the individual chains in the plugin, and then you have parallel chains that are after that pre-chain where you can have parallel chains of plugins that you want to kind of use, and then you have a post-chain. And what we're going to do is we're simply going to load up a multi-channel plugin into one of our parallel chains. So let's click on the plus button here and let's load up a VST3 plugin. And the one I'm going to load up, and it's actually one of the things that's really nice about Patchwork. You don't have to scan plugins, you just load them in, and I'm assuming they're scanned during loading the plugins. What we're going to use here is simply Cinematic Rooms. That's a reverb plugin that I like that works on 16 channels. So I'm loading that in. As soon as I've loaded it in, it comes up with the user interface. And in the user interface, we see that it is currently identified as a stereo plugin, obviously, because we have not yet changed anything in the routing within Patchwork. And it sits on a stereo bus or in a stereo track in Ableton, which is a stereo DAW. So this is perfectly fine. But what we want to do is we want to actually turn that into a 16-channel plugin within Ableton. And for that, what I have to do is I have to click here on the name, and that opens up a menu. And here in the menu down, you have the ability to change the audio input-output routing of that plugin. So let's open that up. And here you can select how many input channels you have and how many output channels you have. And what I want to do is I want to switch that over to 16 output channels, because I'm taking in the stereo signal and I'm turning that into a 16-channel reverb. That's essentially the idea. So let's turn it over to 16. And then you see how these output channels are routed. And here is actually where we encounter the bug, because the plugin thinks it only has 4 channels available and only gives us the option to select 4 individual channels internally, so we don't have any additional channel. This, unfortunately, is only the case for the effects plugin. We will see later that in the instrument plugin, this actually works. In the instrument plugin, we will have all 16 channels available. Not quite sure why this is the case for the effects plugin. I quite honestly tested that not only in Ableton, I also tested it in Bitwig, in Studio One, in Reaper, in Cubase and in Pro Tools, and I have the same behavior on all of those digital audio workstations. Now, it could very well be that this is a Mac-specific issue. So if you're on Windows, it's possible that it works fine on Windows, but on a Mac, we are a little bit limited. The only thing that we can do is we can go here into the overall input-output settings, and we can turn that plugin, the Patchwork plugin, into a multi-channel plugin, but unfortunately that allows us only to go up to 8 input and 8 output channels. So if we select 8 in, 8 out, then actually in the input-output sessions or section of the plugin itself, we can now actually select 8, but we can never go up to 16 in the effects plugin. And once again, in the instrument plugin, we will actually be able to go up to 16. But for the moment being, let's just leave it like that, and let's just think about the application that we are interested in. And the application that I want to really kind of focus here is the idea to take that track and route that into the Dolby Atmos Composer as a Dolby Atmos bed. And for that purpose, there are 2 things we need to do. First of all, we need to add the Dolby Atmos Composer to our session. So let's just go here and search for Fiedler. And here we have the Dolby Atmos Composer, and I'm going to drop that onto the main track here. And here we have the Dolby Atmos Composer. And then we need to add a Beam plugin. And we can actually add the Beam plugin inside of Patchwork. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to our track here, and we're going to add the Beam plugin here to Patchwork. Then I'm going to put that into the post section here. So let's just load the Beam plugin. And I need to go down to Fiedler Audio here, I think. Where is Fiedler Audio? Here's Fiedler Audio. And here we have the Atmos Beam plugin, and let's load that in. And that will essentially load in the Beam plugin. Now, in order to be able to use that, once again, we need to change the audio routing of the plugin itself. So we go back into the settings here, into input-output settings, and we select 16 input channels and 16 output channels. And once again, unfortunately, in the effects version of the plugin, it only allows us to select 8, but once again, we're going to do the same thing for the instrument plugin, and in the instrument plugin, this will actually work fine. And then we need to go into the Dolby Atmos Composer, and in the Dolby Atmos Composer, we just double check if this is connected. Yes, this is connected. This is recognized as 9.1.6, and then there's one additional thing that I recommend always doing if you're working with the Beam plugin, and that is to reset the channel routing. So we're going to open up the Beam plugin here, and we're simply going to say reset objects, and we're going to turn it over to 9.1.6. and that should now make sure that the connection between the Beam plugin and the Dolby Atmos Composer is correct and the 16 channels are correctly routed into the Dolby Atmos Composer. So let's play audio and see what happens, and we are going to see that we have the stereo input here. Now, because we switched the overall settings of the plugin to 8 channels, Cinematic Rooms has actually now switched back to, let me go here to the audio input output, it has now switched back to 8 channels. So actually what I want is I want to have 16 outputs once again, even though it doesn't really do anything. And if I open up Cinematic Rooms now, I actually see that it has correctly identified this to be a 16-channel track as a 9.1.6, and it's going to process the 9.1.6 reverb. Unfortunately, only 8 of those 16 channels are going to be forwarded into the Beam plugin, and they are only going to reach the Beam plugin here as 8 channels, and in the Dolby Atmos Composer itself, we essentially have 8 channels that are reaching the Dolby Atmos Composer, which is a little bit unfortunate because actually I want to have all 16 channels be forwarded. Now, as I said before, it actually works for the instrument plugin, so let's just do the same thing with the instrument plugin. The only problem is that for most of the applications that we want to use that, we would actually need the effects plugin, not the instrument plugin. But the instrument plugin sort of shows us that this is technically possible, and that actually should only be a bug in the system that I'm assuming, once again, that by the time you're watching this is fixed. So let's go back into our Dune track and let's delete the plugin as well as Dune itself. So let me just kind of delete that here and delete, and here also delete. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use the Patchwork instrument plugin. So let's add here the synth plugin. It's essentially the same thing. The only difference is that it is now an instrument. I'm going to add Dune as a or kind of an instrument that is preloaded to the plugin chain. So let me just add Dune here. And here we have Dune. Where's Dune? Dune. Okay, here we are. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing that I did before. So I'm going to add Cinematic Rooms. Let's just add Cinematic Rooms here. Cinematic Rooms, where are we? Here we are, Cinematic Rooms. I'm going to switch that over to 16 channels. So I'm just going to select the audio input output here, and I'm going to set that to 16 channels. And as soon as I do that, you see that in the instrument plugin, I actually now have all 16 channels available to me. So this is really only a bug in the effects plugin. And then we're going to add the Fiedler Audio Beam plugin. So let's just go down to the Fiedler Audio. Where is it? Fiedler Audio Atmos Beam plugin. Here we are. We open that up. We are once again need to change that to 16 channels. So in the input-output settings. And here it's really important that the inputs are 16 channels. The outputs actually doesn't really make a lot of difference because it's directing the audio directly into the Dolby Atmos Composer. But, you know, kind of, we can, just for fun, make that 16 channel output channels. So let's click OK here. And then the final thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to reset the objects. So I'm going to go into the Beam plugin and here reset everything to 9.1.6 just to make sure that the objects are set correctly. And as soon as I do that, I should now receive all 16 channels in the Dolby Atmos Composer. So let's play that. And in fact, I do. So let's go into Dolby Atmos Composer. And yes, all 16 channels are arriving at the Dolby Atmos Composer. So if you're using the instrument plugin, it currently works. If you're using the effects plugin, it does not work, at least not on a Mac. I once again don't know if that works on Windows. If you have the Patchwork plugin on Windows and you're trying that out and if it works on Windows, let me know, kind of leave a comment in the comment section because I'm really curious about that. Also, I'm going to try to monitor the updates that are coming out of Blue Cat Audio, and as soon as that bug is fixed, I'm going to leave a comment in the description of that video. But for the moment being, that is a bit of an issue, honestly. So, what is my final verdict? Well, I think that the update to 16 channels is extremely useful for anybody working with immersive and spatial audio. The example I showed is maybe one of the most interesting applications of this plugin because it allows you to easily add a multi-channel bed to Fiedler Audio Dolby Atmos Composer sessions on stereo digital audio workstations. Unfortunately, with the current bug, that does not really work as intended, so my strong recommendation is that you test Patchwork on your system before you buy the plugin. I'm pretty sure that Blue Cat Audio will fix this issue soon, but I obviously cannot be sure about that. Well, that's everything for today. If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the comment section below or join our free Discord server. The invite link is in the description. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on all things Dolby Atmos and immersive audio. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.